This is WFYI News Now. It's October 18th, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, Indiana hospitals face IV fluid shortages after Hurricane Helene. A new program in Marion County aimed at addressing housing instability. And an in-depth overview of the race for Indiana governor.
Republicans have controlled the governor's office for 20 years, but Republican Mike Braun's message isn't necessarily focused on continuity.
Those stories coming up, but first. The Washington Township School Board approved their next superintendent at a meeting Wednesday night. From WFYI's Education Desk, Sydney Dauphiné has more.
The board unanimously approved Sean Taylor as the superintendent of schools beginning July 1st. He currently serves as the district's associate superintendent. Earlier this year, the district's longtime superintendent, Nikki Woodson, announced she would retire at the end of this school year. At the meeting, Taylor said he would spend the rest of the school year working with the board to build a plan for his position as superintendent.
The job is way too big to do individually, and the stakes are too high. And our kids matter too much. And so that team-based approach will sustain into this transition.
Taylor has been with the district for the past 16 years. Taylor's base salary will be $220,000. The current superintendent's last day is June 30th. I'm Sydney Dauphiné.
Indiana hospitals are expecting IV fluid shortages after Hurricane Helene damaged the largest IV fluid manufacturing plant in the U.S. in September. As Ben Thorpe reports, the federal government has declared a shortage and is working to import IV fluids in order to meet the demand.
Baxter International, the largest manufacturer of IV fluids nationwide, is still only producing about 60% of its normal supply. IV fluids are used to treat a wide range of medical conditions, and there are reports of some surgeries being delayed due to low supply. Karen Kennedy is the Vice President of Quality and Patient Safety with the Indiana Hospital Association. She says some hospitals across the state are harder hit by the shortage than others.
So Indiana hospitals are starting to receive shipments of IV fluids, so that's good news. But I think it's important to know that the situation still continues to be concerning.
Baxter International has said it hopes to be producing fluid at 100% by the end of the year. I'm Ben Thorpe.
The Marion County Prosecutor's Office says housing instability is a major problem for individuals and families involved with the criminal justice system. WFYI's Elizabeth Gabriel reports on a new pilot program that aims to address the issue.
Horizon House is a nonprofit homeless center in Indianapolis. Over the next year, they will help provide lower-level offenders with financial support for short- and long-term housing. Leslie Kelly is the director of programs for Horizon House. She says the funds will allow people to pay for things like first month's rent and create a pathway to permanent housing.
It can help divert that individual or family out of the emergency shelter system, which particularly for families is always operating at capacity in Indianapolis.
Officials hope that access to stable housing and services will also reduce recidivism. The pilot program is funded by $250,000 from the Indianapolis Foundation's Elevation Grant. I'm Elizabeth Gabriel.
And for our final story today, Indiana's gubernatorial race is sharply divided across policy lines. Republican Mike Braun, Democrat Jennifer McCormick, and Libertarian Donald Rainwater each cast very different visions for the future of the state. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith dives into those visions with the three candidates vying to replace current Governor Eric Holcomb.
Republicans have controlled the governor's office for 20 years, but Republican Mike Braun's message isn't necessarily focused on continuity. Rather, Braun says Republicans have become complacent, for instance, on addressing high health care costs.
No one really wants to tackle health care. It's the biggest part of our economy. They write a lot of political checks, all of that. I've got a track record where I can do it, and I'm looking forward to it.
Braun's plan is focused on prevention and wellness, which Democrat Jennifer McCormick notes is a major element of Governor Holcomb's historic public health funding program.
I commend Governor Holcomb and his team. I mean, that has been good for Hoosiers, but it's an expense, but we also need to look at it as an investment. So what is a return on that investment?
Emphasizing bipartisanship, whether by praising Republican-led programs or even adopting GOP policy proposals, is a major part of McCormick's campaign. That makes sense, considering McCormick was a Republican when she served as State Superintendent of Public Instruction. That dynamic works right into Libertarian Donald Rainwater's vision, disrupting the two-party system entirely with a total shift in how government operates.
I see things that are broken.
Take property taxes. All three candidates have plans for providing relief from high property tax bills. McCormick's focuses on relief through state income taxes.
Because we were very concerned about the local level funding. So when you've got schools and libraries and police and fire and parks and the list goes on that are being funded through that, and I talked to enough local leaders, they were like, we can't sustain that.
Braun's puts a much greater burden on local governments.
The bill is mostly about the feature of limiting increases in the future, because that's the complaint that everybody had, is their bills got skewed by things that happened federally that created inflation.
But Rainwater wants state and local governments to fundamentally change their priorities to accommodate a huge reduction in property taxes. A big part of that change? Ending tax incentives used to lure big companies to Indiana.
Not, oh, you're taking all our money away from us. No, I'm saying that we should take the money away that you're skimming off the top and giving to corporations at the expense of the citizens.
Rainwater's philosophy of upending the status quo also extends to education.
I don't think that the 150 legislators at 200 West Washington Street should be making education decisions for the children in the state of Indiana. I believe that should be parents, teachers, local school boards. I believe we need to decentralize education in the state of Indiana.
If that philosophy is Rainwater's biggest selling point to voters, McCormick's is likely reproductive rights. She wants Indiana to undo its near-total abortion ban.
The fact of the matter is this election's about we're either going to have a governor who trusts women or who does not. I'm the only candidate who has been pregnant, and I've given a live birth, and I understand firsthand the complexities of pregnancy.
Braun waves aside criticism of the ban, calling Indiana a pro-life state. His selling point is his career building a small auto parts distribution business into a multi-million-dollar company.
I'm going to try to fertilize the field of entrepreneurs. Remember, I'm a Main Street entrepreneur that was a small business, scraping, scraping, just trying to do everything to survive for nearly half the time I ran it.
Much of what decides a state-level race is influenced by national politics, something none of the candidates for governor can control. But what they each hope is that the visions they presented to voters can help them capitalize on whichever ways the political winds shift the race. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by Drew Daudelin with support from the news team at WFYI and public media journalists across the state. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. Kendall Antron produced our music, and I'm your host, Abriana Herron. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back on Monday.